Good.
Hi everyone, welcome to the ASPC Presidential Debate. Thanks for coming. It's put on by the Pomona Student Union. My name is Maya Booth. I'm going to be the moderator tonight, asking me questions. I was invited here as a moderator, as an editor from the Student Life newspaper. Voting starts tonight at 9 p.m. And we're going to start with the candidates' opening statements. Each candidate is going to get 2 minutes. We have Rishi Sangani here and Sarah Appelbaum as our candidates for president. And we are going to rotate who speaks first. So we are going to start in alphabetical order with Sarah.
Okay. And I'm just learning about the format as it's happening as well, so please bear with us. Yeah, thank you all for coming. And I guess I'm excited to be running for ASPC president. I've been really involved in a number of ways on Pomona's campus in my time here. I can say a little bit about myself, I keep forgetting to do that. I'm a junior and a gender and women's studies major. I have worked at the QRC for my whole time at Pomona. I've also been a QQuet mentor, sponsor. I'm an RA this year in Olden Board. And I guess this just seemed like a logical next step for me in terms of my involvement on campus and really being committed to seeing positive change in my time at Pomona. And I think that's all I have to say for an opening statement. I don't think that's quite 2 minutes.
Okay. I'm doing the same thing as Sarah, not really sure what's going on, but here we go. So my name is Rishi Sangani. I'm a freshman at Pomona. I'm from San Diego, California. I'm going to double major in math and econ. This year I was lucky enough to serve as the freshman class president and as well as an ASPC senator along with Sarah. In my opinion, from what I've seen from Nate and what I've observed as the years gone on, the ASPC president has a hand in almost everything that happens on campus in terms of committee meeting, in terms of activism, in terms of events. I see Nate everywhere. And it's important for the ASPC president to have a hand beforehand in everything else just to get a decent feel of what's going on campus. I feel that with my activities I've done, ranging from putting on events like Pomona Bowl to working with OCL to put on sponsor group visits to the CDO, to working with ITS to put a print center in Mud Blaisdell, to other events that have gone on campus. I think that I have made the connections and have the experience in order to get the job done well.
Okay, thank you. Now the format is going to be, we're going to ask questions. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to respond, and then 1 minute for the candidate who didn't speak last to have a rebuttal if they wish. The first question is going to be, what do you think the ASPC president's role should be with respect to the administration and students? And how will this play out in your style of governing the Senate? And we'll start this question.
So the ASPC's role, like I mentioned earlier, is a figure on campus that not only represents the student body, but represents Pomona College as a whole. Pomona College is unique in the sense that we only have 1,600 kids and unique that we have the 4 other colleges around us. But it's also really special because of the sense of community that we build right as soon as we're indoctrinated as a freshman. Before coming here, you all get an email from what your sponsors are, and before you come in here, you already have, in a sense, a pre-made set of friends. And the idea of being at Pomona is that you and your community talk about what a community is, what a community should be. I think that as ASPC president, I really want to foster that belief. Me coming from South Campus, living on South Campus this year, I really enjoyed, my sponsor group is the best. And I really enjoyed that sponsor group experience. And I wish that, like, in a sense, I could have the entire South Campus be as one big sponsor group. And it's a big goal to have, but I think it's definitely reachable in the sense that we can build connections and meet other people that we normally haven't met before. A couple ideas I have. One idea is for PEC. PEC normally plans really, really big events, and they can have funding for like small events that you want to have. I would like to see PEC more as like have weekly roles, weekly stuff that's going on, like an in-and-out run every Thursday night, things like that. And then if you get your in-and-out run, you have to stay. If you order in-and-out from them, you have to stay within like Mud Lounge and talk to the other people there, things like that. I think that there's a lot that the ASPC senator can do, or president, excuse me, can do, that can build the sense of community, but through small little changes like that.
And sorry, was the question particular about the administration, or did you want to know about like style of governing?
We'll get more specifics to the administration later, but the question was what the president's role should be with respect to the administration and students, and how will this play out in your style of governing meetings and such.
Okay, thank you. So I guess something that I said at the Frank Forum, for those of you who are there, this will be a repeat, is that I think it's important for the ASPC president to be a representative for the students and not of the students. which basically means to me that the president is kind of serving as like as a figure, I guess, that like often the administration, people outside the college community look to the president for like what the word is on Pomona College students in general. And I don't think it's the president's job to necessarily make those decisions, but rather get feedback from students and then do their best to represent what it is that students are talking about. In my experience on committees, I found that often the student roles, while they're very much valued by administrators and also faculty and staff, are very much tokenized in the sense that they want like the student perspective and feel that whoever the student is that's in that group will be able to provide it. So I guess it's important to me in running for ASPC president to make sure that I'm not trying to act as the token student representative, but I'm really getting feedback from everyone. And also, I think that in terms of the administration, that the administration definitely attempts to have Pomona students' best interests in mind, but doesn't always know what those interests are, doesn't always know what student needs are. So again, like I said, I think it's just really important to be getting as much student feedback as possible at all times.
Rishi, do you want to respond for a minute?
No.
Okay. All right, the next question will start with Sarah. This is a three-part question. How will you approach the ASPC's relationship with the Board of Trustees? How do you envision the role of new student representatives on trustee committees? And what should be their connection to the ASPC?
Sorry, can you read that one more time?
Sure. How will you approach the ASPC's relationship with the Board of Trustees? How do you envision the role of new student representatives on the trustee committees, which were recently created? And what should be their connection to the ASPC, those committees?
The student representatives or like the committees as a whole?
The new student representatives, how do you envision their role and those trustee committees in general?
Okay. So I guess I have similar thoughts to the Board of Trustees like I do to the Pomona College administration, which like I said, I think they definitely want to do what's right for Pomona students, but don't always have like an idea of even what campus looks like. In conversations with trustees, I've always gotten the impression that there's like a sense of removal, I guess, from the campus. They're not here very often. They live in various parts of the country and the world. So I guess in terms of ASPC's relationship to the Board of Trustees, it's really important to stay connected and to really be making sure that a student voice is represented in trustee spaces. And specifically in relation to the new representatives, I'm very happy that there's more opportunities for students to get involved in the Board of Trustees. I think it's important that students don't have to take on the full commitment of being on Senate for a year and all the attendant responsibilities in order to have their voice be directly represented with the Board of Trustees. And yeah, I guess I'm excited to see the new potential and new opportunities for ways that students can become more present in the conversation with the board and really be able to better represent what student life is like and what student needs are to trustees who are often well-meaning but don't sometimes know what that looks like.
So in terms of the Board of Trustees, the system that's been in place at Pomona College with the administration here and the Board of Trustees is it's designed for the Board of Trustees to kind of have this secrecy that they're not on campus all the time and they only come to campus once a semester. So there is this kind of secrecy designed in place. However, I really support the trustee task force in that they're putting these new students on it. Because it's hard for senators, like Sarah was saying, to do what their jobs are, but also to try to double in being with these committees, which will meet very often, will have big policy changes. I really like the idea that these students are separate from Senate, but they're also still elected. If ASPC president, I think that these three new roles, especially with this whole controversy that happened first semester, will have a very big role on campus. And students are going to be active and see what these students think, what they want to think. And it'll be important, I'll put it upon myself, to meet with these students as much as possible once a month, have them at least once a month, have them come to Senate, give a report on what the trustees are talking about, what's important, what we can do as ASPC to get involved, and make sure that whatever happens, we won't end up blowing it up into this big perspective or big issue that we hadn't saw in November and December. I think that open communication and transparency, even though there's this secrecy designed in the system, is now something the trustees are realizing can be used to their benefit. And as ASPC, being involved with everyone here, I think it's important that we realize this transparency as well.
Sure, I don't know if I need a minute, but yeah, I guess I just wanted to not only echo the importance for transparency, but say as well that I would be really committed to making sure that those kind of efforts of transparency that hopefully the board will be engaging in, that the student representatives will be able to help with, are communicated to the student body, and that the responsibility definitely doesn't end at the student representatives or at senators. I think that sometimes on Senate, we start to get the impression that like everybody knows that we're doing, when often I think students don't even know what senators really do for an hour or an hour and a half a week. So I think it'd be really crucial to make sure that whatever's happening on the Board of Trustees and whatever the student representatives are doing, that can be communicated to students in a timely manner as well.
Okay, thank you. Move on to the next question. How do you see ASPC's role in engaging with dining hall unionization issues on campus? I'll start with Rishi.
Figured this one was going to come up. So with the dining hall workers, it's an interesting dichotomy because they have been trying to unionize for a period of over 10 years now. And during this whole unionization process, I did take out time out of my day and I made appointments with Oxtoby, try to figure out what can Senate do as a whole to figure out what basically how we can facilitate this process and not make it as murky as possible. And in November, what he said was that now we've reached the point with the dining hall workers where we're just waiting for them to submit cards. On our end, we have all the infrastructure in place, so when they do submit cards, we can go through this process as fast as possible, even within a span of 4 to 6 weeks. They're just waiting for them to submit cards, waiting for them to have an election on their side. And Oxtoby said he doesn't really want to get involved in what they're doing, and that this is an election that they should make their decision, irregardless of what Pomona College and the administration thinks. I absolutely agree with this view. I think that for now, the issue has kind of died down now, where this is April now, and that was back in November, and we really haven't heard a lot about dining hall issues. I've heard a couple protests on campus, but in terms of big publicity like we saw in November, December, I haven't really heard much. So I think if we would have heard something by now, we would have submitted cards or a new issue would have arisen. As being ASPC president, or if I am ASPC president, I should say, excuse me, I think that we should be involved and we should be ready to act once they submit cards, but right now I would take more of a passive role to wait for them to submit their cards in order to move forward.
So I guess I want to start out by just mentioning that I have been involved in Workers for Justice in the past, that I was pretty centrally involved in the extended vigil that happened on campus, and worker issues are really important to me. That said, I don't think it's the ASPC president's job to try to push those issues through, but I do think it's important for ASPC president to be informed and to also make sure that student needs are getting communicated to the president, to the administration. In terms of where things stand with unionization, my understanding is that Oxtoby is kind of sitting on a demand for being neutral if unionization does come to a vote, and that the administration right now is not interested in being neutral and wants to be able to also share what their beliefs are with whether workers should unionize or not. And it's my belief that it's really important for the administration to take a stance of neutrality. I think with differential power relations in the administration and with workers, as we've seen on campus through this whole struggle, that I don't think it's really a situation of both parties having kind of equal stake in neutrality as it's been portrayed by the administration. But like I said, I don't think it's necessarily the ASPC president's job to push that through, but that's kind of my own stance personally. I think what ASPC president can do and what ASPC Senate can do as a whole is to be at least supporting the workers on our campus, regardless of taking a stance on unionization, making sure that students know what's going on, making sure that there are ways for students and workers to be connected, because it seems like in a lot of ways students and different service workers on campus really aren't connected. So yeah, and I think we'll see kind of what happens as this continues. It does seem like things are kind of at a pause right now. I think that's all I have to say for now.
Sure. I think that it's important that ASPC also stays neutral during this kind of quell during the storm. I do think, though, that once the storm does rise up once again, that it's important that we do stay neutral. I think that ASPC did a decent job of trying to get the correct information out, and it was so hard trying to find which story is right out there. But the big thing is that you would open up different, instead of trying to find the source and then present it to ASPC. I think it would be important for the source to just come directly. So I would be in favor of open houses where we could get some of the dining hall workers to come. I know that that would be a little bit of a lightning rod on campus, but it's important for the students to get their perspectives, not from ASPC, but from the issue and the people involved in the issue directly.
Okay. Next question, we'll start with Sarah. What do you see as the most fundamental issue or issues on campus now and in the coming year, and how will you address them practically?
That's such a big question. Thank you. I think one of the, I don't know if this would necessarily be considered an issue on campus, but I've gotten the sense, both before I was on Senate and this year being a senator, that students feel that the Senate is like very distinct from their lives and isn't necessarily relevant in their lives. So I think what's really important to me at this point is that students have a sense of Senate being important, being relevant, that they at the very least know like who the senators are and what their jobs are, and what Senate is doing each week, but more so get a sense of really feeling like Senate has a presence on campus and is doing good work. And some things that I at least have in mind that could address this is on my part, having a weekly office hour, opportunities for students to give feedback, making sure that students are aware that their voices and opinions are being actively solicited. In addition, something that we've already discussed on Senate this year is inviting in student leaders, directors of resource centers, members of different groups in to talk to Senate. I think that there's a lot of different work being done on campus that's not necessarily connected at this point, and I believe that it's really important for us to all be in better communication with each other, and for groups to at least have a sense that Senate cares about the work that's happening, and also to be able to let senators know what's going on, to, like I said, to sort of counter that disconnect. And yeah, I think that's it.
In terms of a fundamental issue on campus, I think the biggest one right now is the bike policy. I think that, especially living on South Campus, that there aren't enough bike racks in front of Bud Blaisdell. Now they're putting more bike racks in front of Harwood. My opinion, there's not enough bike racks in between Merritt and Rains, just because the bike racks that they have are front wheel walking only. I think that that's going to be a much bigger issue on campus. Pomona College, or ASPC specifically, in the last 4 or 5 years, has been pushing for more of, subliminally, in a sense, pushing for a bigger biker culture on campus. So with the starting of green bikes, with adding more bike racks, as throughout like these last 4 or 5 years, I do think that the bike policy, especially when the freshmen come next year and they see all these bike racks, I think that it will become a bigger issue. I think that right now, with the policy set to enact on April 16th, there still will be some issues because all the bike racks won't be in place that we hoped to be at this point in period. That's another whole issue with the South Campus construction. But I do think that that's a big issue. I think it's important for ASPC to stand up for its constituents. And from what I've seen, I think that a lot of the constituents, or at least my constituents this year, have kind of been angered by the bike policy, and that it really hasn't been, in a sense, comprehensive, and that we should put the bike policies after they have been bike racks. Now there's other issues that go on. I think it's important, especially for, in my opinion, this being the biggest issue on campus, that the ASPC should publicly open the Senate, or maybe have an additional time out of Senate, besides at Monday afternoon time they meet, where they can maybe have Senate in front of Rose Hills, and they could talk openly about what the bike policy is. I think that, I have a bike, people at my sponsor group have a bike, people all over campus have bikes. It's going to be a bigger issue, especially at the start of next year.
I definitely agree that that the bike policy will be a big issue on campus next year. And I guess something that I think we learned in the whole process is how important it is to get student feedback up front. That I think students felt like the Student Affairs Committee had moved too far in the process by the time student feedback was solicited, and at that point we were kind of already in the motions of putting a new bike policy in place. So I think the larger lesson there is that when these issues arise on campus, no matter what they are, it's really important to get student feedback right in the beginning. And I think another consideration that I've thought about a lot in regards to the bike policy is making sure that our bike culture is also accessible to low-income students. When bike policy first came up in the SAC, when I was on the committee last semester, one of the big discussions was to have like a $50 fine when your bike was put in a place where it wasn't supposed to. And stuff like that is just to me, doesn't make bikes or having like a bike culture that's accessible to low-income students, like I said. I was one of the major proponents for getting U-Locks that were subsidized, sold in the Coop store, which seem like they've done really well. So yeah, I believe that that's important as a consideration in addition.
Thank you. This will be the last question before we'll invite questions from the audience. So various campus clubs, and individuals, campus clubs, and organizations have recently been endorsing lists of candidates on social networking websites and other platforms. What are your thoughts on the effects that this has on the integrity of the campaign period and the community at large?
I actually support this. I think that it's important in order for students, especially first years and people living on South Campus and then other students living on North Campus, to get an idea of clubs that they're not necessarily a part of who they represent. So with the Claremont Progressive supported Sarah, but I still think that it's important for them to propagate who they support. People know what the Claremont Progressive is. They advertise themselves as a radical left group. But I think if there was like a radical right group, if there was one that called themselves in the middle, I think it's important just for the informational basis of what people think. There's a fair prominent amount of people, in my opinion, that have been posting who they support on campus. I think it's fine. I think that it shows that it gives a different perspective to all the students, and I think that's important. If they support me or not, that's a whole different story. But in terms of getting more information out there and instead of just kind of basing it off of your friend group, what your friend circle is, and getting more of a broader perspective on campus from clubs you may not have heard of before or not have been a part of, I think it's important for these people to put out their list of candidates and who they support.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that in terms of the integrity of the campaign, that while my hope is that every Pomona student goes out and diligently researches every candidate and reads up on everything they can, I don't think that's always the case, and it's my impression that it often comes down to stuff like name recognition. So I think that in terms of endorsements, that shouldn't necessarily be anyone's deciding vote. I would hope that people take those as suggestions. And like Rishi said, that those are really an opportunity to have be a more informed voter and have different parts of the community, I guess, informing your vote. But I don't think it would be. I think it would be just as irresponsible to vote based on endorsements that you've heard without researching the candidates as much as to ignore the endorsements or to have endorsements not be allowed in the first place.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think the idea is the same thing, is that it's more of about information, and that once you find out what all these groups support, you can make a more value judge statement instead of value judge decision based off of what everyone thinks.
Okay, thank you both. And now we will take questions from the audience. Anyone has anything?
A big part of the ASPC president's job is dealing with budgets and money. In fact, this is something that every spring ASPC decides on its operating budget for the next year. And I was curious to know what you two thought about, where is ASPC spending money where it shouldn't, or where is it like wasting money? Where is it? Where could money be sent to? Where are places on campus that are deserving of ASPC's money, and sort of what you think of how ASPC spends its money and anything that should change.
So we'll start with Sarah.
Okay. So in response to part of the question, it's been my experience that there are a lot of groups and resource centers on campus that are underfunded, that are doing good work, sometimes that are new, sometimes groups that have been doing work for a long time. One group that comes to mind is Advocates for Survivors of Sexual Assault, which in terms of budget and also just administrative support has been lacking in recent years. I don't know if, I actually haven't sat in on any budget committee meetings. I don't know if I feel that there are any obvious places where the budget should be cut. I think that's something that that I would need to learn through the process, and again, also be getting feedback from students about where students believe that the budget could be cut. But yeah, I definitely do see places on campus where budget could be increased, where more money could be allocated. And another thing that is something that I've been talking about with folks is the potential, and this may sound bad in light of recent news about CMC stipends, about the potential for creating new small stipends for ASPC positions that don't have them. So I think that's another place where that would definitely be a discussion, but is another place where funds could go that might make those jobs or might make those positions more accessible for students who typically are electing work-study positions on campus in order to be able to take on the kind of responsibilities that Senate requires.
I feel I'm also a little bit in the dark with Sarah on this one. I haven't sat in on any budget committees. I'm trying, I mean, circumstances have arisen, taking the opportunity to serve on the budget committee for the 5C clubs in 2 weekends. So I'm trying to get involved. It's hard for me. I really want to get involved just being an econ major. In terms of where budget goes, like I mentioned earlier, I would like to see more money going to PEC and more funding for PEC. Instead of PEC right now being more, PEC is like Pomona Events Committee, and instead of it being more focused on parties, I would like to see it more on events and like collaborative community building. I would have to, before I give an answer, this is going to be more of a shorter answer, but I would have to see the numbers first and see where the money is going. I would like to see more money just go to diversity groups or affinity groups. I've talked to a couple people within ARC and within AMP, and they've definitely expressed the idea that they would do more events if they had more money and if they had more funding. So that's something I'll definitely look into. But in order for me to give a more comprehensive view, I'd really have to take a closer look at the numbers.
Oh, no.
Okay, more questions?
Is there any pressing issue on campus besides blanket policy?
Like in general?
Anything?
Like that we see as a pressing issue on campus?
Yes, next year.
We'll start with Rishi.
I actually sat down last night and tried to think of something that I felt was pressing. And there were small minor issues that were going on, but nothing, like Tommy said, was pressing. So I'm going to have to answer no right now.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone and how grateful I've been that this year has been like relatively scandal-free, particularly in terms of RHS, who has not had a great track record in the past. And being on RHS this year, I've been glad that nothing like gotcha has repeated itself this year. And I think my understanding of pressing issues are maybe a little bit different. Nothing comes to mind immediately that's like policy. And we've already talked about worker stuff and unionization, which I do think is a pressing issue on campus as well. I think that there are, as I mentioned, a lot of issues with just the way that people are connected on campus and different groups not communicating with each other. A conversation that we've been having in Senate recently, or something that's come up, is community building, which some of you may have had the opportunity to take part in the beginning of the year. How there's really no follow-up and it's just the same thing over and over again every year. And I don't feel like people are learning from that. And that there'd be a lot of potential to have a kind of follow-up to community building so that we're able to be making more connections, building more bridges between different groups. So I would consider that a pressing issue, although it's maybe not the same as by policy. But yeah, nothing super controversial that we haven't mentioned comes to mind. Can I ask a question back?
To the audience member?
Yeah. Is there any pressing issue that you had in mind that you'd like us to talk about, or something that you anticipate coming up in the coming year?
Just curious.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions?
If applicable, I guess, what's the most significant change that you see in your tenure from the Brown
I'm sorry, could you explain the question a little more?
Like, what would you change compared to how the ASPC is running from now, or the ASPC?
Oh, the Brown administration.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
I had no idea what you were referring to.
Or if there would be one at all, where do you see it?
Any major changes from the way that Nate ran Senate this past year to the way that he would run Senate next year? Is that the question?
I can leave the room too.
It's being recorded. You would watch it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think this is drastically different from the way that Nate's run Senate, but something that we've talked about is like what the role of the facilitator is, and like what a facilitator does, and something that I think would be really important to me is to view the role of ASPC president more as a facilitator role than like a someone who's necessarily a decision maker, and I don't think that's something that wasn't happening with Nate, but maybe not something that Nate was thinking about as explicitly. That I really think it's important for the president to be able to take in lots of feedback, to be able to, like I said, facilitate conversations within Senate. And I'm definitely not interested in being a sort of heavy-handed ASPC president or making lots of executive decisions. That's not necessarily something that interests me. And like I said, I don't think that's something that Nate was doing either, but I guess like the role of a facilitator is something that would be really central to the way that I would think about the role of ASPC president.
I think Nate's done a really good job this year, not just because you're in the room, but I do think you've done a good job this year, or from how you've spoken about it, of making ASPC more transparent. So a couple of things you've done there, you said, like Committee on Social Responsibility, you said normally this is something Senate generally approve, or just I approve, but this year he sent out all the applications to the senators and said, let's talk about this collectively. So I think that transparency in the sense of that I'll make the ultimate decision, but I will want as much feedback as possible. I think that's something that we can definitely continue. I like the fact that almost every week when we go to Senate, when I get the agenda, there's always somebody visiting, giving a report on an update of something that came out 3-4 months ago, if there's a new task force, if there's something moving offices or different things like that. He's done a really good job of getting the senators involved so that he puts a responsibility on us to go tell our constituents and make it more of a collaborative effort instead of him making all the sole decisions. So that's something I'm definitely going to look to continue. To answer your question in terms of something big I would change, or if there's like a kind of like a turnover I would see, no, not really. In terms of how in terms of how Senate is run. So.
Anyone else?
So the ASPC is the largest funder of student programs and clubs, and the Alumni Association is the second largest on campus. And in light of the controversy over students contributing to the Alumni Donation Fund, how do you see the ASPC working together with the Alumni Association in the coming year?
I think that it's hard for, just in general, for ASPC and alumni to work together, or not work together, but they have different goals in mind. So ASPC is concerned about the students here and future students, while the Alumni Association is concerned about past students. So they have different issues they want to focus on, different issues they want to fund. I know, like for Ryan, like with Freshman Cup, they've supported you in the idea that, like, when you graduate, that they seem like the alumni office does a lot of things on campus so that you'll donate later. While ASPC is not necessarily concerned about your donations. So in terms of how funding is gone, I think that their goals are different enough that I think that it sounds like you that they're fairly separate. And I think that I'm not going to see, or I really don't foresee the Alumni Association giving a lot of money towards clubs just because that's not really where they're focusing on. If that makes sense. I think that with their whole idea on tuition-free day was that it was more like raising awareness about like what we do on campus and how we make your experience, and not necessarily about the individual experiences like clubs, green bikes, those kinds of things, the Coop Fountain that make your experience actually what it is.
Any more questions from the audience?
Thanks. Yeah, and I don't know if I have anything more to add on, except that I do think that will probably be something that needs to be addressed. I believe that tuition-free day was annual giving, but combination. Okay. But I think my only response is that I do think that will be something to be in conversation about, even though I don't see it necessarily drastically affecting the way that the ASPC budget is functioning.
Now, any more questions?
Of all the positions on Senate, why ASPC president?
Is that me?
I was going to make a joke, but I'm not going to. Maybe I'll say it later. After having spent a year as Commissioner of Community Relations, which is a position that I really enjoyed and appreciated, I guess in a lot of ways it just made sense to me in terms of being ready to take on more responsibility in Senate, being prepared to commit more of my time and more of my schedule to the job that Senate requires. And also just having learned more about the way that Senate works. I think that the job of ASPC president is exciting to me. I think, as I've said in my campaign bio, that there's a lot of opportunities for positive change on campus. And like I said, I think that trying to bring in the sort of ideas about a facilitator's role to the role of ASPC president is something that's really important to me. So yeah, those are some general reasons.
So naturally, being a freshman, this is a question that over the last 3 or 4 days that I've been asked a lot. To me, the ASPC role represents all students, and this is something I touched on earlier. But that, like, I feel I have a great idea of what the student body wants in terms of different groups on campus. If you say why of all, you said of all the positions, why ASPC president? It's because it's the position that has the biggest impact on change. I think that now, just being here a year, I've seen a lot, especially with the whole documentation issue going on. I've seen a lot of what's going on campus. I think that now I'm ready enough to step into this role and make more of an impact of how we can go about living our lives as students. In terms of waiting a year or so, I suppose I could. This is just my nature that if I see an opportunity before me, I'm gonna go for it. There's no cat in the bag. If there's only one other person running, when I turned in my form, there's only one other person running. This is something that it was almost an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So.
Thanks, Rishi.
This is nothing against you. No, this is nothing against you. This is not a personal issue. Don't worry about it.
Any more questions? Okay, well, that wraps up our debate. Thank you all for coming, and good luck to you all.